Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Ogden. I'd like to welcome you to a live webcast with Mr. Lyndon Larouche. Tonight is February 1st, 2013, and this is part of our regular Friday night broadcast on LaRouchePack.com. Tonight we will follow our usual format. Mr. Larouche will make some opening remarks, which I can assure you will be very historic in their nature. And following that, we will have Jason Ross and Leandra Bernstein, who are joining us in the studio tonight to engage in a dialogue. So I'm proud to give you Mr. Lyndon Larouche, and without any further ado.
This is probably the verge of one of the most important stages of history in a long time. We're reaching throughout the world, especially the transatlantic region. We're currently reaching a point of a breakdown crisis. There are various kinds of evidence of this. Contrary to the usual custom, people think in terms of, well, it's fixed, it can be fixed, it can be regulated, it can be controlled. No, it's not the end of things now. This is just a little thing that we're going to go through and everything will be all right, say, in a short period of time. But in point of fact, we are at the virtual point of a breakdown crisis in the transatlantic system, and that will spread throughout the entire region. Now, you have some interesting developments which pertain to this. What we have is we have in the Department of Federal Justice in courts, we have some interesting developments which are counter to what has been the apparent trend up to now. If you look at Europe in particular, you find that all of Europe, Western and Central Europe, is in a process of now near disintegration. If you just watch carefully the number of bank systems, for example, the Rothschild system, which controlled the Atlantic Ocean trade, is now in deep trouble. You get in terms, Spain is gone, Portugal is gone, Greece is gone, France is about in a terrible situation, Germany similarly. And the British system, as the Rothschild case indicates, is not far to go. So we're now at the point of a breakdown in the transatlantic region of the world economy. And other parts of the world are not exactly in glorified positions right now either. So the point is, what is the answer? If you take Wall Street, you take the current president of the United States, other factors, which are leading factors, not only Wall Street, but other things, you find that they are in a hopelessly strained breakdown condition. And yet they pretend, in large part, they pretend that they've got things under control, that the big fix is just around the corner, and everything is going to be worked out. You'll see, you'll see, you'll see. It will all work out. Some people will suffer. Some people will lose. That happens all the time. But it doesn't really mean anything, you know, because we won't let it happen. We will get some more money in here. We'll steal from somebody. We'll get more money. That's all we need is more money. We're going to print more money. We won't even bother printing it. We'll tell you we printed it. And that's what's going on. Now you see a contrary tendency in terms of some of these federal courts. The federal court has acted as if it knew that this whole system was about to come down. And in point of fact, it is about to come down, unless a very radical kind of change is introduced. So people who think they've got the solution, people think they can tie on this, the people who think they can get money, they can survive. That's what they said in Germany in 1923. Print more money, print more money. And what did you get for printing more money? You got Adolf Hitler, who was already in the play then. And it was a straight run from then to 1923 into 1932, 33 odd. And then you had Hitler. But you were going to have it all along from the result of Versailles. So we're now in a situation where the key thing for us to consider is what changes, what for most people will be seen very radical changes in terms of the organization of the economic system and the financial system in particular. It's all going to happen very soon, unless somebody among us takes the steps which change that direction. Now, we can say on the one side that there's no hope for a recovery of the United States economy ever in our lifetime unless we install glass-steagall as we've defined it now. Without the immediate action to bring glass-steagall into play, we're on the verge of a general crash of the entire U.S. economy as well as the transatlantic economy at any time. There's nothing, there are no fundamentals out there which would indicate a contrary result. Now, the argument is, of course, that the certain financial institutions which know that we don't like them, we think they're a waste of money. We think they should be bankrupted because they are already bankrupt. They're not worth anything. And we're going back to the old-fashioned measure of what works and what doesn't work. They ain't worth nothing. They show a lot of cash, they show this and they show that, but they ain't nothing. And the whole system's about to crash. So what will stop the crash? And your problem is you've got to deal with these bankers, the crooked bankers. And if you don't put them under control and let them go through bankruptcy, take that whole system, the Wall Street system as it's called in the United States, which is really a British system. Ever since the time of Andrew Jackson, the British financial system has controlled the United States, with a few moments here and there where changes occurred. So what can we do? Well, we've got to bring these guys under control, the speculators, the gamblers. And the best thing to do is simply install glass-steagall immediately. That is an essential step without which, from my standpoint, there is no durable remedy for the present crash oncoming. None. So therefore, you've got to say, wipe these guys out, let them go. If they can go on their own, under their own power, let them go on their own power. Back to the old kind of the banking system they used to represent in the time of President Franklin Roosevelt. Let them go back to that. But we cannot sacrifice, we cannot compromise on the point that we in the United States in particular cannot afford to give any more bailout money to anyone in terms of the present bailout money system. It's bankrupt. We're on the edge of a general bankruptcy. And some people may take us into a world war because of the pressures that are developing right now. There's no way this thing can survive on its own. Some radical change has to occur. Now, the easy one is glass-steagall. And let's go through this thing just a bit quickly as to what that means. Glass-steagall, we reenact immediately, totally without any variation, Franklin Roosevelt's glass-steagall law. Now, that will mean that we will be essentially wiping out a lot of firms, financial interests, which are intrinsically worthless already. What's happening, we're bailing out worthless institutions and stealing from the people and stealing from the economy to do so. So there should be no defense at government expense of bailing out any more of these swindling institutions. They don't produce anything except debt. They don't produce any payments of debt, net payments of debt. They don't help the economy. They stop the feeding of people, not feeding them. Everything is wrong about this system. And especially since the repeal of Glass-Steagall earlier. It was one of the last acts that poor Bill Clinton got sucked into. And since that time, we've been headed toward hell. And since 1907, we really have been going to hell. In 1908, we plunged into hell, and we've been going there ever since. Now the end has come. The time of reckoning has come. And Glass-Steagall is the key, in part, to the solution. That means that we're going to have to essentially go through something which has been anticipated in part in a peculiar way, but not so peculiar. The measures that were recently taken in Washington area to put this process through the beginning of a bankruptcy reorganization of the system, which means that we're not going to, the federal government no longer will bail out anything of these commercial banking systems of this type, the gambling type. And they're on their own. If they can make it on their own, that's their business, that's their privilege. If they can't make it, that's their problem. What we have to do is save the U.S. economy. Now, what you've seen in Washington, in the bank system there, what you've seen is a proposal which is going to make President Obama very unhappy. But it's a necessary step, because without it we can't survive. We can't survive as a nation. We're headed toward hell. For example, as I've indicated before, all of Western Europe, all of South America, or virtually all of it, most of Europe in particular, is now in a process of collapsing. Spain, Portugal, now Italy, Greece, and so forth. It's on the road. And we can't go much longer on this one. Now, all right, Glass-Steagall solves the problem. Because what it does, it essentially takes the U.S. government out of the business of bailing out speculators. So we stop the flow and make no promise to bail out any of these banking institutions of the relevant type. They simply will be allowed to go their own way as long as they don't get in our way. We have to do that now. Because once this thing were to blow, I don't think anybody could fix it. In other words, if this were to blow, and the assumption where we had to save the economy by more bailout, that would mean the destruction, the physical destruction of the U.S. economy and the European economies. Now, the reform is being discussed in Europe, but it could not occur initially in Europe. It could only occur initially from the United States, despite the current president of the United States, which would mean he would have to be put under control, even as president. And simply by enforcing some of our basic laws, that would do it. But the basic thing, we must have Glass-Steagall. Now, what that means, of course, is that we're going to restore the kind of banking system we had under Glass-Steagall originally. We're also going to institute other measures. Now, the problem here is this. We are so bankrupt, we as the United States and all the nations of Western Europe, take the case of the Rothschild interests. The Rothschild interests have gone under. So that aspect of the transatlantic region is no longer really a viable one. So what we are going to have to do in the United States, and everything that could happen to Europe, of benefit to Europe or some other places, will have to come from an initiative by the United States. Because only we have the built-in system which could do what has to be done right now. If we can save ourselves, we can then use what we're doing for ourselves to save nations of Europe and other places. But if we go the other way, we'll never make it. That means, therefore, we've got to go ahead with an immediate Glass-Steagall reform. But the Glass-Steagall reform has certain limitations of what it could do by itself. It will do exactly what it's defined to do, and anyone who says it's not true is simply stupid or a liar. One of the two. Glass-Steagall works. It's the only thing that does work right now. But it won't solve all your problems by itself. Why? Because after we clean up the banking system of the United States, there won't be much left for anyone to eat. You will have a banking system that works, but it will be very small in terms of its capabilities. Now, therefore, we're going to have to add another provision, which is not strange to our system. We're going to have to actually create a new kind of system, a credit system. A credit system uttered under the powers of the United States. And that credit system will then be used to create credit for production and for related things. So the federal government is going to create credit, and outer credit based on a supervisional process. We are going to say, is this worth investing in? Will this work? If it will work, okay. How long will it take for them to do this job on a credit system in order to come into a balance of their operations on their own books? If they can do that, and if the thing that they're proposing is useful for the United States government, under its credit powers to outer credit, should award credit under supervision to firms which will conduct things which we know are useful for the recovery of the U.S. economy and its improvement. This does mean the immediate installation of NWAPA, the water system. And this has several aspects which are highly relevant. First of all, we've been robbed and raped. Our western lands have been raped. The water levels have subsided. Why? Because what the farming and process and so forth was based on drawing down the reserves of water supply inside the system. Therefore, what happened is the land level subsided. The ability to grow crops economically subsided. And now we're into a general breakdown crisis. So therefore, we're going to have to have a water system, water management system, which coordinates with the need to be able to generate more production of food. So therefore, the one institution and project that can do that is NWAPA. By extending NWAPA as one of our credit projects, we can generate a tremendous number of jobs. We can begin to restore the productive potential of our agricultural system, especially in the mid areas, from the Mississippi essentially to the West Coast. And then we can do the same basis, we can rebuild an actually productive system. Now, what's happened recently is production has stopped, essentially. The growth of production has stopped. And therefore, we've replaced production by bailout. And bailout produces nothing. It drives us into hyperinflation, into bankruptcy. So therefore, we need a combination of several projects, federally backed projects specifically. One, a general projects for responding to the need for the application of credit to the actual physical growth of production and general welfare. We also need to deal with special cases like NWAPA, which is a major project, which will restore the physical potentiality of the western portion of the United States, Alaska, Canada, and also northern Mexico. This is going to be a big investment. It's going to be a Franklin Roosevelt-style investment, but on an even larger scale, because that's what's required. And by our doing that, we will then enter into agreements with other countries as across the Atlantic. And with these agreements, we will work on the same basis of building a transatlantic credit system like that we create for the United States. It will be theirs and ours. It will be their sovereign right. It will be ours. But we will cooperate in the same kind of system to restore stability of the system. Now, there's more to say on this, a lot more to say on this, but that's the general option. Right now, we must do this right now. I don't know what the deadline is, but I'm not going to wait for the deadline. I'm saying as of now, the trend is we either do this or we're not going to make it at all. Which means we've got to get a little bit rough. Now, the other thing we've got to build into this, which is implicit in what I already said, is to supply a credit system. What is going to happen, we're going to have a real system, not the junk kind of system we've had recently. We're going to outer credit, federal credit, guaranteed by the federal government, under this kind of program. And that is going to be the basis for the regrowth, the physical regrowth of the U.S. economy, as well as the immediate source of sustenance for the various parts of our nation which are in distress right now, and the categories that are in distress. Without these measures, there is no hope, because if you look at the world now, follow quite carefully the disaster zones. You have disastrous collapse here, there, that bank, this place, that nation, so forth. It's coming on fast. And it's now accelerating at a high rate. That doesn't tell you the exact date the collapse is going to occur, but it does tell you where you're going. And you're worse off and less capable of fighting the problem every day you don't do what has to be done. Either we stop this now, or we will go into a hopeless crash. Therefore, we must do this now. It's the first item on the agenda. If we put this on the agenda, we will be assured of an opportunity of surviving. If Europeans, in particular, European nations, decide to imitate what we're doing and cooperate with us, they too can be rescued, and so forth and so on. But that has to come now. We are running out of opportunity. We either do this immediately, or we pay the price. And it can be still a nuclear war caused by these circumstances, or it can be something else. But we are at the point where we're going to make a decision of this type based on the U.S. initiative behind a credit system, or we're not going to make it at all. We're just plain running out of time. There are no options. And you stop the last ounce of bailout Barney. He's shut down. He's shut off. Now, as of now, shut him down. He's a fraud. You can't afford frauds of that scale anymore. Shut him down. He's an idiot anyway.
Well, thank you. If you're just tuning in, you're watching a live webcast with Mr. Lyndon Larouche. Now, we've got quite a number of questions that have come in, and we might have a few more than usual, in fact. Starting off, just really on the same theme that you just addressed, I want to ask Leander Bernstein to please come to the podium.
Thank you, Matthew. This is a question that came in from a contact inside the U.S. government, and he requested that you remark on the events of the past week, the news of the past week, because what's been happening makes clear that the real economy is in a complete free fall. The unemployment statistics came out this week. The fourth quarter growth in the United States was down unexpectedly to some. GDP is also in a free fall. You have 8.5 million people who have been dropped from the labor force since Obama became president, and the contact indicated that all of these factors seem to point to a greater urgency for capital investment in infrastructure. It's needed, for one, because it's absolutely needed. Our current infrastructure is decrepit. The incident on the Mississippi River last week with the barge accident makes clear well, it wasn't exactly slight, but incidents like that can utterly shut down internal transport and trade. And aside from needed infrastructure, it's the best way to boost economic growth. So this contact would like to get your thoughts on these goings-on, and I would also like to tack on, if I could, a question of my own where it concerns your discussion of credit and deciding whether a program is worth the United States investing in. And so my question is what is the type of debt that the United States has to assume in order to accomplish these projects, assuming we're going to take on a debt?
Well, the first thing is we've got to change our way of thinking about money. People think that money has some intrinsic value. paper money, money as such, has no intrinsic value. None. We are confused because we say money growth. The concept is money is growth. More money is more growth. Well, you see the history of the United States recently, you see that's a farce. Because what's happened is we have been putting more money as money into circulation, or quasi-circulation, more frankly. They take worthless currency, which is not even denominated in substance. They pile up a debt of this kind of crap, worthless crap. The debt piles up. Nothing is done to invest in actual production. Services of certain kind, yes, they sustain them. Restaurant services, where the food gets dirtier and cheaper, or more and more expensive, one or the other. So that what our pattern of employment since the rescission of Glass-Steagall during the last period of President Clinton's life as president, has been down. There has been no net growth by any physical standard, no net growth per capita in the United States. On the contrary, everything is getting worse, and the people who are employed or could be employed aren't qualified to be employed. We have a generation. Remember how long this is. You had 2 terms of Bill Clinton, 2 terms of George Bush Jr., and we have now this mess. Every step, not only since then, but essentially since Clinton's presidency, every step we've taken in the United States has been to destroy us. The amount of money uttered has increased. The monetary aggregates have increased. But there's no production. The entire food belt of the United States, especially the grain belt, the cattle in the southern area, all gone. It's gone, permanently gone. We're going to have to start all over again in these areas. The water supply in the Western Plains, the whole land area has subsided because of a drawdown of the water reserves in the whole region. We have lost production because we've lost people who can produce. They've either retired out of old age or something of the kind, or injuries, or they're dead. And what they're replaced by? Utter incompetence. Most of our youth layer, 16 to 25 and so forth, is utterly, absolutely incompetent. They cannot produce real wealth. So what we're doing, we're building up the aggregate of money, both in pure gambling money, the bailout money, or shifting the composition of employment and income from production to fake work. And therefore, we've come to the point that we have to make an immediate turnaround. We're not going to look at this thing with, it's got to come up to the standard, the employment's got to come up to the standard. We don't have people who fit that standard. We cannot employ people who actually fit the standard required for employment. The drug problems, the killing problems, all these things, we have a degenerating population. The gun problem is not a problem. They're shooting the wrong people. Essentially, it's what it amounts to. You're getting people out there to kill each other. They don't want to produce anything. They don't want to be useful. They live in a fantasy. They have a right to live in a fantasy. If you don't give them money, they'll steal it. They don't have food, they'll steal it. If you get in their way, they'll kill you. And you have a population so demoralized that it engages in self-killing of people. They kill themselves. They decide to kill themselves. One nut goes crazy, pulls out some weapon of some kind, doesn't have to be a gun, and in various ways they begin to increase the homicide rate per capita. And the younger they get, the worse they get. So therefore, we've come to the time where we have to realize we have to measure things in terms of physical productivity per capita. We have to think of health care, because we have lunatics. Most of our young people are lunatics. They will show it sometimes and not show it at others. But they're already ripe to be a lunatic on any notice or any lack of notice. And that's happening. They don't want to work. They don't like the idea of working. They don't intend to work. They're just children running on into old age without finding the road to work in between. So this is an absolute disaster, and therefore you have to have very inspiring leadership under these conditions, and you have to have a government which is committed to do what is needed, not what some people think they want. We have to think about the net effect. We have a population, as we have in the transatlantic region also, for example. We have to meet the standard needed to support that population, the physical standard. And nothing else really counts unless you do that. Well, the other part of this problem is the way what happened since, shall we say, some people, some presidents, like Aaron Burr's crowd, which actually drained this. And we destroyed the United States. We destroyed its intention. We destroyed its principles. We got back something with Lincoln, and they shot him. The British did it. There's no doubt about that. The British created the whole problem in the United States, and we've lived through that. The British control the United States from the area of banking centered on New York City and going up to Boston, and they've dominated the United States from that standpoint ever since. We have not owned our own country. And the history is there. The facts are there. So that's what we've come to, and therefore we have to go with the concept of reconstructing, in a sense, our country. Reconstruct it to operate on a productive basis, a really productive basis, not a fake basis. We also have to realize that there are other things that we have to change in terms of commitment. We have to go to a productive society, not a make-work society. Make-work is nothing. The rate of increase of make-work, which produces net nothing, is growing higher. The productivity of people is collapsing. The classes of jobs that are productive are collapsing. So that we need get this thing out of the kind of system that came with Aaron Burr's crowd. And that just shut it down, stopped it, and go back to what our Constitution specifies. Go back to the policies of Hamilton as under the Washington administration. We've never been fully on the right track since that time. We've had interims like Franklin Roosevelt, what was done by Lincoln, and a few other things, which were heroic things, and they were good. But we have not been committed to the kind of United States we had created under George Washington and Hamilton since that time. We've always been stumbling along. Sometimes we got lucky with a good president or some good other institutions. But in general, most of the time, we've been going to hell as a colony of the British Empire.
Well, there's a lot of questions that came in. So I'm going to try and sort of pull together about 12 different emails that came in and turn it into one question for you here. It came in on a variety of topics. A lot of them were relating to the judicial system, though, and taking up what we discussed a lot last week with the major court ruling against Obama. Some of the questions that came in were, well, what does this mean? The court ruled, but the members of the National Labor Relations Board haven't been kicked out yet. Obama's still the president. How is the court going to make all these other things happen? Which, I mean, it can't. You know, that's not what that court's going to do. Or people were asking, well, where do we take this? What other things could we redress through the judicial branch? How can we get things done by going through the judiciary? So there were some emails about various challenges to the legality of Obama's occupation of the White House, from things like his citizenship to his use of a false social security number, meaning he never registered for the Selective Service and therefore can't be employed by the federal government, which obviously doesn't apply in this case at all. But I thought that what a number of these questions brought up was a question about what is the role of a citizen who wants to be a leader right now. That a lot of these types of redress people are seeking, these judicial redresses, are sort of looking for a way to file the right paperwork, and then somehow the judicial system is going to save the day and provide leadership. And that's not the role of the judicial system. I mean, it did what it did, as we discussed last week, but at a certain point, the Congress is going to have to do the impeachment. The Supreme Court isn't going to remove Obama from office, neither will the D.C. Court of Appeals. So I think to try to put it together, it seems to me what would help people with these questions would be if you could address what is the role of a citizen right now who wants to be a leader. How are they going to shape what the Congress does? How are they going to make things happen?
I got an answer for you. The point is, we've had a screwball system, which is called the party system, the political party system. And if you want to have this nation recover from its present ills and what might come later, if we don't, is we've got to end the party system. That does not mean you eliminate political parties, by no means. That means that you don't allow the party system as such to control the U.S. government. That's the difference. And that was the intention, the original intention. Actually, in point of fact, you can, in bright figures, you can say that probably a maximum of 5% of the total eligible voter population is qualified to lead government or to shape the policies that lead government. Otherwise, they make a mess of it. And the party system is the worst possible thing. You have every Joe Blow in the world is in the party system. Some of them are the most influential in the party system, and they haven't done a lick of work in their whole life. And they don't intend to. They intend to get money. They don't care about production, they care about money. They care about their retirement funds. They care about these kinds of things. They don't care about the nation. They say, what we're going to do, we're going to control this government. How are we going to control it? We're going to control the population. We're going to control the voters. We mean now the voters are now the enemy of the United States? Well, they can be if they have the wrong policies. If they think that their comfort and their desires determine what the nation as a whole is going to do to survive, to develop, you're nuts. Because the great majority of the American people are not qualified to make those decisions. Because they were never made qualified to make those decisions. They were told in the political system, under the party system, or sometimes called the party system, that this kind of mechanism has destroyed the impulse within the population to achieve by accomplishing actual things which are useful to humanity. Am I getting paid off? Am I getting this? Am I getting that? Buy me, buy me. It's a buy me. The Democratic Party is the buy me party. The Republican Party is the buy me party. What controls the government? The party system, or otherwise the party system. What you have to have is you have to have a real government, which is our Constitution provides, if we recognize that. And that means that the party system is not the standard of political decision-making. It cannot be. And we've been through it. It has a history. The party system has never worked. It has always tended to destroy the United States' effectiveness. Now you've got an example of what happened in this in terms of what the courts did, we discussed last week. Right? Now that was a decision against the party system. That was a decision made to reestablish the sovereignty of the United States. And that's all they did. They did a lot of details on it, but it was all good stuff. And it was done to help rebuild the United States and its system of government. The enemy is the party system, better called the party system. And that's what the problem is. And we've got to restore our government as a constitutional government, in which the voter, yes, has the individual rights protected. Individual rights. Every individual is entitled to have certain rights. But you're not going to gang up with a bunch of ignorant people who've not been educated, who don't know how to work and don't want to work, or want to work in some silly way. They don't care. They want their graft. They want their payoff. I'm a politician. I own you. Why? I'm a politician. I own you. And therefore, I'm going to vote. Me and my friends, we're going to vote. And you're going to do as we tell you. That's the way it works. In other words, there's no standard of performance for politicians. There are some political leaders who have a moral standard of their own. And they will tend to act on the basis of what they consider the absolute. But most people in this country are ignorant of what it takes to be a leader in the interests of the nation. So it's better that we have a system in which the states have their role, in which they run the states as they're part of their role. But you don't want a national system, a national party system, better called a party system. And that's what has been our curse. Because there are only about 5% of the top intellectual layers in the United States who are actually capable of making and understanding policy. You sometimes get lucky, and you may go up to 15% of people who actually are seriously considered and have some competence in understanding what policy is. But we have presently a population, particularly the younger people today, who have absolutely no conception of what the policy requirements are of saving a nation. And nobody is trying to get them to do it, in general. So this defect, which in our system, has to be removed. Now, the way we do it practically, we have, as you saw in the case of some of these people representing the court system, and other groups of people, or the financial system, as well as the court system. And we've seen that they have come forward in pushing measures and reforms which are necessary. But they're encumbered by the fact that you've got a lot of other people who are party system people. And they are first concerned about buying their constituents with bribery of various kinds. They have no mission orientation. They're not responsive to what happens to the nation. That's not my problem, they say. That's not my problem. My problem, I got to get this. I got to get that. Our people need this. Our people need that. We have no time for your discussion. And we come to the point that the nation has to face the fact that it changes its behavior in this respect, or we're not going to have one. We're on the verge of losing everything. We're on the verge of the destruction of the nation. And if we keep up these dirty tricks of party politics, or party politics, we keep that up, we're not going to be here much longer. We're gone. And what you need is you have to understand you have to serve the interest of our people, the interest of our people, the life interest of our people. You've got to make sure that somebody is looking after them, is protecting them from swindlers and out of their own ignorance. So you need a system where you don't turn the whole nation's government over to a bunch of people who don't know what the hell they're doing. You want decisions made by people who are competent to make those decisions. And we had a system, our system of government, which we established under the influence of our president, first president, and the influence of his Treasury Secretary. Hamilton, they understood what to do. Most of our other presidents were incompetent. Jefferson was systemically incompetent. John Adams was intrinsically incompetent. It was a grouchy neighbor had something to do with that. But we had good presidents, but they didn't last very long in terms of those terms of office. They didn't. John Quincy Adams was the best, the absolute best in that whole period. He was the man who took our country, which was then just a territory, with some areas which were occupied, and within the term of 4 years of his administration, he transformed this area of the United States, the whole area, its whole present area, excepting Alaska and Hawaii, which came on later. He established that area as the driver for the greatest nation that had ever been built on this planet. And most of that was accomplished, the foundation, the structure of that was done in 4 years under John Quincy Adams, and was prepared by his predecessors who made it possible for him to do that. And there's Jackson was the turning point, where we went over to become totally corrupt British fools. And therefore the party system is the greatest enemy of the United States. And it's the enemy within. Because it's the system of the corruption system, of the so-called party system. Yes, we recognize the parties. They have a right. They need representation. Let them have representation. But don't crush the processes which we require to actually get the job done. What happened to our industries? They're gone. Who did it? Popular opinion did it. They mean the people didn't want these jobs? No, they didn't know any better. They were going along to get along. The slogan of the Congress, go along to get along. Don't think about what you're doing, what you're accomplishing, or what you're destroying. And that's our problem. And we're coming to a point that in order to avoid destruction or dictatorship, one of the two, the party system, as we've known it before, must be radically reformed. And the party system as such must not be the power that determines the Congress's conscience.
Now, this next question takes up similarly the topic of investigations and at a higher level, the United Nations, and investigation that was just launched last week to be led by Ben Emerson, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Human Rights and Counterterrorism, looking into the whether the U.S. use of drone strikes constitutes war crimes. And about 2 weeks ago, when it was announced that John Brennan was going to be Obama's nominee for CIA director, the Ron Wyden of the Senate Intelligence Committee wrote a letter to Brennan demanding that he answer certain questions, including how much evidence does the president need to determine that a particular American can be lawfully killed? Does he give that American the opportunity to surrender before killing them? And this question was posed to the prospective CIA director, who his hearings will be this coming week. Now, to return to this UN investigation, it comes in a context where the United Nations Human Rights Commission just issued a report a couple days ago finding that Israel, their continued occupation of the West Bank, actually constitutes violation of international law, including war crimes. And now with the use of drones, this investigation by the Special Rapporteur Emerson would include use of drones by the United States, the United Kingdom, and Israel. And the issue, he says, is accountability. which is the central purpose of this report, presumably to be released at toward the end of this year, potentially October, November. But accountability is a central purpose. But at the same time, he states obviously the investigation has not been done yet, and he says, I haven't seen evidence that would enable me to conclude that there is a case that war crimes have been committed, although, of course, that is an issue we are going to be looking into. And obviously, the civilian casualties, which the Obama White House has denied has refused to take any accountability for. But here's the question. Presuming this investigation goes through, the results will be presented to the United Nations General Assembly. If it were found that war crimes were committed, it would be brought before the permanent members, of which the United States is one with veto power. So I'd like you to address this possibility, but also really a mafia factor in these types of investigations, where generally when you go through a process of unearthing where the bodies are buried, more bodies tend to be buried in the process. So this is a serious investigation. War crimes have already been implicated for Israel in the case of the West Bank, and war crimes are currently on the table for the United States, the President of the United States, for his use of drone attacks. So if you would please address that.
Well, if you look at it objectively, because when these measures are taken and proposed, they don't tell the truth. They try to create a pretext which covers over what the real issue is. For example, the case of Adolf Hitler. And there's no difference in terms of criminality from the inception of the Hitler regime and the Obama regime. They both have had the same intention from the first year of their occupation of office. The first killing was the killing of the people who were considered the unnecessary people. And they were killed in the same way that Obama and his program prescribed killing. I referred this, to the first year of Obama in office, and indicated that what he was doing was the same thing that Adolf Hitler had done, and he was doing it. There is no difference between Obama in his first year of his life as president and that of Adolf Hitler. And it's gone in the same direction. Tony Blair is one of the worst mass murderers on the surface of this planet for the same reasons and similar reasons. So the question here is not of what right is or what the argument is. The question is it's being done because they want to do it. Not because they have a reason to do it. They invent a reason to do it. And then they just do it. And they tell you what they plan to do after they've done it. Huh? So this is criminal. And Tony Blair is one of the worst criminals on this planet. Look, for example, I was involved with some of the people in the British system on this question of going to a second war in the Middle East. And we were involved in it. I spoke on the thing in conjunction with some people from the British system, but they went ahead anyway. There was no basis for actually launching that war, which from the time it started, it was just recently terminated, and it made a general mess of the entire region. It was a fraudulent act by Tony Blair. Tony Blair is a murderer. He represents everything that's evil and foul in international politics. And yet he is the one who controls Obama. Obama is conducting the same kind of policies that Blair proposed in terms of health care, assassinations. killings. And who are the great heroes who do something about that? The point is, you can't say, well, we have to investigate and see if it's a crime or not. But they're killing people without trial. They're killing people and letting you know about it later. How the hell do you get justice that way? This is the same thing as Adolf Hitler. And boy, Obama hated me when I pointed that out. You can't put the mustache on Obama. Well, there are two reasons to put a mustache on him. One is to hide his ugly face, and the other is that he's no damn good. And that's a fact. When you try to apologize for him, what are you doing? You cannot come up with an honest apology for this guy, unless you're insane. That we are in an insane society, and the fact is that we have no sovereignty, true sovereignty as a nation, because we allow a foreign clown to come in, Obama. We have no proof that he was ever born, even. There's a presumption he was born, but we don't know what the circumstances are. Anyway, but we get to this thing, and somebody makes a decision which is contrary to our national law, our historic law. And they wipe it aside on an arbitrary gesture. And we put up with it. Why do we put up with it? The party system or the party system. That's why you put up with it. They say, well, we've got to go along with it. We've got to go along with the party. We've got to be loyal to our party. And being loyal to our party and playing the party system becomes the excuse for every kind of crime that's ever committed at this point. And the other trend here you have to consider that on the court decision, on the court in Washington, the Washington, D.C. court, everything that needed to be said was said there in those proceedings. It was all said. That enacted would secure the basis for restoration of our national liberties. And anyone who's opposing it is an enemy of the people of the United States. Because, in effect, that's what they're doing.
All right. Well, this will be the final question for tonight. And people definitely should. If you haven't read the ruling from the court, you should. It's a really wonderful ruling. I think from what you said before that people should also familiarize themselves with our material on Andrew Jackson to be re-potty trained. So this is 2013, and we can all celebrate the fact that the world didn't end as some Mayans may have thought last year. But 2013 is an important year, and I'm sure there's going to be more discussion on this over the next couple of months, because 30 years ago, on March 23rd, 1983, Ronald Reagan announced the offer of the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was your policy of collaborating with the Soviet Union to make nuclear weapons, in Reagan's words, impotent and obsolete. The policy was to replace mutually assured destruction with the much preferable mutually assured survival. Now, you had warned at the time that were it rejected by the Soviet Union, their economy would collapse in about 5 years, which indeed it did, coupled with the warning that if the West didn't change its economic policy, the same would be our fate eventually, which is what we're now facing. So today, your PAC are organizing around the policy of the SDE, the Strategic Defense of Earth, meaning a concept of using space and other technologies to defend mankind from threats from space, like asteroids and comets, as an opportunity for international cooperation and obviously a huge economic and science driver. So, this is I just wanted to read a couple of quotes recently about how things aren't going well right now with U.S.-Russia relations, in case anybody needs quotes to demonstrate that. Just earlier last month, the secretary of the Russian Security Council was in Beijing for discussions where he talked with the Chinese about their shared concern about U.S. plans to build basically this global missile defense system, including the new radar planned being built in Japan. At the same time, actually just last week, Prime Minister Medvedev spoke about his concern about the U.S.'s inflexibility about the European and other missile defense systems. Medvedev said that we clearly understand that if we do not have guarantees, such as the pairing of our programs, the US and the Russian, this means that missile defense could also work against the Russian nuclear arsenal. What does this mean? This means that the parity, which we recorded with Obama by signing the New START Treaty, is being cracked, because missile defense is a direct continuation of nuclear offensive capability, of combat nuclear weapons. So we've got a similar situation today where there's a threat of nuclear confrontation. There's the potential to diffuse that, as well as defending ourselves from a greater threat from beyond our planet, and have an incredible science driver in the process. Now, Obama isn't Ronald Reagan. So how are we going to take advantage of this opportunity? What do you see as this being possible for us?
Okay. Well, the dimensions of the question are rather large, as you know you are aware. You can crack at it from various aspects, and you eventually would come around to the same net total, but the tour would be rather long, and so it might take some time to get along one tour route to another to your desired destination. The fact is that the use of thermonuclear warfare, not just weapons, but warfare, the use of that kind of warfare has reached a point where any use of that means of warfare by especially major nations, major powers, ensures the virtual extinction of the human species. So obviously, that's the thing you have to look at. What they're proposing to do, which has consequences. The whole thing is based on popular stupidity. See, the assumption is you come to the idea of this kind of threatened warfare, and threatened warfare is the basis for actual warfare. This is threatened warfare, which is headed toward actual warfare. It's proposed nuclear warfare, which is actually going to be implemented as thermonuclear warfare, unless it's stopped. Because the process now is in that direction and only that direction. Now, the problem with the other side of the problem is most people in the world today are pretty stupid when it comes to forecasting. Because they have the belief, which is a stupid belief, the belief that you cannot know the future. That's the essential principle on which they operate. We have to prevent things from happening, but we don't look at the future consequences of our deciding that should be the case. So we say we're building a defense system, but it actually is an offense system. But they call it a defense system and argue that on the legalistic terms, it's only a defensive system. But the very nature of the operation is that of an offensive system. You cannot build the system without running into an offensive operation. And the offensive operation takes less than 1.5 hours to virtually destroy most of the human species. And what is being done now is moving in that precise direction. And that's the point. And the point is it gets back to the party system. The same thing. Saying, well, popular opinion. But popular opinion is made by stupid people. That's why they're called popular. Because they don't know any better. What they're doing is they're setting into motion general warfare. And the level of general warfare today is everything, but especially thermonuclear weapon systems. And if you get into a conflict between Russia and China on the one hand, and the United States and part of Europe on the other side, you are going to have a situation in which you may never have people coming back again. That's what they're playing with. They're playing on, I can bluff you better than you can bluff me. But what they're headed toward, because they have no ability to understand the future is the furthest thing from their mind. Their idea is what they can do. They're really like mafia. They have no consideration of reality. They should not be allowed to have really any power at all. People who represent that kind of thinking should not be empowered in government. But what you have so many stupid people. They weren't necessarily had to be stupid. We used to have an educational system which was not too bad, and some parts were good. We don't have a good system anymore at all. We have a few teachers who are still old enough to remember when there was an educational system. But the idea that you can answer this question in simplistic terms, you can't. You have to say, there's no way you can carve this thing out and separate the bad from the good. You can't do it. If you're going to go with this system, you're going to go all the way because you've set it up where everybody is going to have to go all the way. And if it goes, there won't be any people left to speak of. So what was being done by this president and by his accomplices in Europe in particular is the greatest crime ever plotted against mankind. And obviously, those people who do that cannot be trusted with government. And if we can't take care of that matter, there's not much you can do about anything. So the time has come, either we have the guts and the organization to stop this nonsense, or we're gone. Humanity can be finished. And yet, on the other hand, with resources which we can use, we can create a defense of Earth within a whole range. We don't have the means right now to do that. But if we get at it fast enough and well enough, knowing the performance capabilities of mankind, we can do it. Maybe we may be too late, but it's certainly not help not to start now.
Well, I would say in conclusion, I think that a very good lesson of 1983 is that one person and a small handful of people recruiting the leaders of society, including the President of the United States himself and several top scientists, can change the course of history. And I think we're at that point again with the year 2013. I think that many people who are watching this broadcast have felt that they're now participating in those kinds of historic changes. And I know that this regular series of broadcasts that we've been doing on Friday nights is a very large aspect of that. So, again, thank you very much, Lynn, for what you've done tonight. And thank you, Jason and Leandra. And thank you all for watching. That brings our webcast to a conclusion. Thank you for watching LaRouche TV.